Hello friends and welcome to another video lesson from DBOS Talks. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of new uploads. This video is in the playlist called Serious Fun with SQL, and here we'll learn about the decode function in SQL. Decode, D-E-C-O-D-E. Decode is so special because it works like an if-then-else statement within an SQL statement. Okay, to appreciate this, you must realize that a select statement is like a sentence. And you can have a long statement, you can have a long sentence, but it can only have one terminator, one like a punctuation mark to terminate that statement. Now, let's look at the syntax of decode. Okay, so for those who are not familiar with an if statement, it will have an if condition. If that condition is true, then it will do something. Okay, so here's your decode function. Since it's a function, it's followed by a pair of parentheses. Okay, and then the first parameter would be, I could show you better, maybe like this. Something like this. So decode, and then you will specify a column name in a table. If the value of that is this, then return this. If the value of that is this, then return this. And then optionally, you have an else value if it's some other value. Okay, so it's not so clear right now, but let me just get you up and running. But before that, let's look at a typical select statement without the use of a decode. So select surname, given name, gender from customers, which is a table. So we can see there are three columns: surname, given name, and gender, a couple of rows in there. Now, if we look at the column called gender, this one, we see two kinds of values in there, M and F, which are, as we know, refer to male and female. Now, for display purposes, or for instance, in a report, in an SQL report, we can use the decode function to show the gender in its entirety rather than just the code. Okay, so let me just paste here a modified select statement. So it looks very similar to the first one, except for this part over here, which I added. Okay, so I am adding a fourth column, which I am aliasing as gender desk, meaning gender description. But in truth, this column doesn't exist in the table. The table itself actually doesn't have a column called gender desk. How do we know? Because I'm using an alias keyword here, as. So how did we get to this value? It is a derivation of the value of gender using the decode function. Okay, so you will see the syntax of decode right in here. So meaning decode, if the value of this column, which is gender, is M, if it's M, then display male. Else if the value is F, then display female. Okay, so let me just show you here the SQL equivalent of this if I were to write an if condition. So you look at this is the equivalent if statement for the decode statement I have just shown you. So if gender, if the value of that equals M, this is just a pseudocode, then display male. Else if gender, if the value of gender is F equals F, which is a string, then display female. And if. So this kind of syntax is a pseudocode based on PLSQL of Oracle. But remember that this series of if statements are already being done by the decode function in here. That's the beauty of that, because you don't need another bunch of code which will result to a separate statement having its own separate, terminator. So in this case, the if then else logic will be embedded, if you will, in the select statement. So it's right here. Decode this. Again, the syntax goes like this. Decode column value. If the value is this, display this or return this. If the value is this, then return this. Okay? So let's just run this now. So now you notice that as compared to the previous select statement, this one displays or returns 4 columns: surname, given name, gender, gender desk. Like I said previously, the column called gender desk doesn't really exist in the table called customer, but it's just a derivation of the value in gender column in this customer table. And how was it derived? Using the decode function here. Okay, so the logic again is if gender value is M, which is this, I am highlighting in blue, then display male, correct? If the gender value is F, I will display female, which is correct. You see, that's how a decode works. It's convenient because you can embed it within a select statement. So making your select statement a bit longer, but anyway, it already does its thing without having to build a separate if then else statement statements. Okay, so let's now if we review the values, they're correct. The logic of the decode is working correctly. Now let's rephrase this SQL statement by using an else functionality. If you remember in my pseudocode I showed you earlier, this is working right here with an if gender is M, display this here, and then else if. Okay, let me paste it again. So the one you've just seen doesn't have an else. It only has an if, an initial condition, and then it will have else if. Okay, you can have another else if, as many as you want, but it will still be an else if. Now the next example you're gonna see will be something that will be like this, using else. Okay, instead of else if, although you can still put an else if here, right? But I'm just showing it for simplicity. In this example, you will see else instead of else if. So else in program logic means any other values as compared to those that have been already mentioned or covered in the preceding if conditions. So in this case, I only have one condition preceding the else, but in reality, you could have a lot more. Let's say you have 10 if conditions. If something equals this, else if something equals this, then you would have the else again means any other values, any values other than those that have been covered in the preceding if conditions. That's the else. Okay, so now let me just show you here a select statement that uses a decode function again, but in this case it will now use or incorporate an else functionality, an else logic. So the select statement looks very similar. Okay, select surname, given name, gender, decode gender, comma M, comma male, comma female. So I'm again saying if the value of this column equals M, then display or return male. And then here's your else. Else, I don't have an F, you see? It's female. Okay. The difference within this is that in the former one example, my syntax was gender M male, F female, because it's an if else if. Here it's an if else. Okay, so again the equivalent of that is this: if gender equals M, then display this, else any other value, display female. Okay, so let me just now execute this statement. Okay, if you'll notice, it has the exact same output as the one using the previous SQL statement. That's because the logic is although it looks different, it's actually doing the same thing, because there are no other values for gender. It's just male and female, and that's it. So naturally, if it's not male, else will cover female. It will be female, okay? Okay, so that's our video for today. I hope you learned something. This is the decode function right here. And again, it is a very useful function because in SQL, because it allows you to do or use an if then else functionality within your select statement without having to build or use another statement separately from the select statement that you already have. Okay. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe. And I'll be seeing you in the next video.